Okay, so we started talking about conservation of momentum in collisions today. And if we had more time, I would have gotten to this sheet. On this sheet, it tells you there are different types of collision. One type is where both are moving, right? Like two cars crashing into each other. Another type is when one object's moving and the other one's at rest. And then the third type is if they're both at rest. And this one is really called an explosion. Okay, so it might be like a bullet in a gun, but it could also be a person diving off a raft or a person throwing a ball. And they'd be on like roller skates or something. So they, as a result of the two parts of the system going away from each other, or one of them being fired away or propelled away, the other one moves back too. Now, the one piece that I didn't list here is that in both moving or one moving and one at rest, in both of these, the objects could stick together after the collision or they could go off on their own. Okay, so we're going to do a few examples to get you used to it before I send you off on your own to do more. So example one on this sheet that I gave you is a 100 kilogram cart traveling 24 meters per second east strikes an 80 kilogram cart initially at rest. And it's not a bad thing to draw your picture. Okay, so a 100 kilogram cart and it's going, so V1 initial is 24 meters per second east. And it strikes an 80 kilogram cart initially at rest. So here's my 80 kilogram cart, and V2 initial is 0. After the collision, the 100 kilogram cart is traveling 10 meters per second east. Okay, so V1 final is 10 meters per second east. So it's slowed down as a result of the collision, but it's still going east. What is the velocity of the second one? So what's V2F? Okay, so you write down your momentum equation, your conservation one, M1V1 initial plus M2V2 initial is equal to M1V1 final plus M2V2 final. Initially, V2 initial was 0, so this whole term is going to be 0. We're looking for V2F, so that take this term over, M1V1 initial minus M1V1 final. That'll equal M2V2 final, and now to get V2 final by itself, divide by M2. So V2 final will equal M1V1 initial minus M1V1 final divided by M2. Okay, now just be careful of your positives and negatives. Here everything's going east, so everything should be positive. So 100 kilograms times 24 meters per second minus 100 kilograms times 10 meters per second divided by 80 kilograms. So on the top, 22,400 minus 1,000, so 1,400, 140 over 80. I think you get a V2F of 17.5 meters per second. Works out to be positive, which means it too is going east. Okay, so it had no momentum initially, but now after being smucked by the 100 kilogram guy, it now has a fair bit of momentum, but in the end, the total hasn't changed. All right, number 2, a 5 kilogram cart moving 1 meter or 2 meters per second north. So since it's north, I'm going to draw it this way. So this is number 1, and M1 is 5 kilograms. And V1 initial is 2 meters per second north. And an 8 kilogram cart moving 4 meters per second south. So M2 is 8 kilograms. And V2 initial is 4 meters per second south. Okay, so we have a north and a south, so we already know we're going to have to look after our directions. After they collide, the 5 kilogram cart, this one down here, rebounds at a speed of 1 meter per second. Rebound, so the V1 final is going to be 1 meter per second, but if it's rebounding, it means it's going in the opposite direction, which means it's now going south. And we want to know what's V2F. Okay, so again, M1 V1 initial plus M2 V2 initial equals M1 V1 final plus M2 V2 final. Everything's moving this time, so nothing goes to 0. We're solving for V2 final, so take this term over. So M1 V1 initial plus M2 V2 initial minus M1 V1 final equals V2. So if you want V2F by itself, divide by M2. So V2F equals M1 was 5 kilograms, and assuming we're calling north positive, positive 2 meters per second, plus 8 kilograms for M2, and it's initially traveling south, so negative 4 meters per second, minus M1, 5 kilograms. V1 final was 1 meter per second south, so negative 1 meter per second, divided by 8 kilograms. So this is 10 minus 32, so minus 22 plus 5 is minus 27. No, minus 17. Wait, 10, 32, 22. Yeah, minus 17 divided by 8. So it ends up being negative 2.125 meters per second. And what does the negative mean? The negative means south. Okay, that's example 2. Example 3. A 200 kilogram cart initially moving 5.8 meters per second. So this is 200 kgs. And V1 initial is 5.8 meters per second. Collides with the second cart of mass 225 kilograms, initially at rest, so V2 initial is 0. When the carts collide, they lock together. So these were like the two you were doing for the homework, and they move off, and you want V final. So M1 V1 initial plus M2 V2 initial will equal M1 V1 final plus M2 V2 final, but we already know, pull the V final out because it's the same, M1 plus M2, and this goes to 0. So on this side, just M1 V1 initial, divide by the masses. So M1 V1 initial over M1 plus M2. So 200 kilograms times 5.8 meters per second divided by 200 kilograms plus 225 kilograms. And you should get a VF of 2.729 meters per second. Works out to be positive, which means it's still in the original direction. And it didn't tell us in the question what that was, so we can just put a ridge after it. All right, the last example. Will we have time? Maybe. 2 figure skaters, mass 50 and 80 kilograms, are standing together at the beginning of their program. Okay, so which one? The 81 goes east. So this is the 80 kilograms. As the music begins, they push off of each other. So this guy goes 1.5 meters per second east. And the question is, what is the velocity of the second one? So this is V1, and it's V1 final. And you're looking for V2 final. Why is it final? Because at the beginning, they're both standing, they're not moving, their initials are both 0. Okay? And so when we do the equation, M1 V1 initial plus M2 V2 initial equals M1 V1 final plus M2 V2 final, both of these terms go to 0. Okay, so it becomes negative M1 V1 final equals M2 V2 final. We're looking for 2's velocity just because of the way I laid it out. So V2 final, going to run out of time. Negative 80 kilogram times 1.5 divided by 50, and you should get